Oh, hey guys. As you can see, I'm kinda in the middle of something right now. My friend Lemonade Lobster lost his kingdom to an attack by the sinister Shadow Shrimp Crustaceus. I didn't really have anything going on this weekend, so I figured I would join up and help him out. The gig even came with a free horse, which I've used to jump up 2 whole tiers on the tier list. I just finished up the last of the enemies out here, and now some of the guys are standing in a circle around the boss, poking at him until he breaks his hand axe. Just waiting on them to finish that up so Lemonade Lobster can seize and we can move on. Well, since you're here and I have a little bit of downtime, we might as well do a video, and given the circumstances, I think now would be the perfect time to talk about Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. And while I've got your attention, maybe you could even like the video and subscribe. You know, help the channel grow a little bit. I guess a Fire Emblem video isn't really the best place to ask for that. After all, we all know that bases are better than growths. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, the game that almost killed Fire Emblem.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
The 11th game in the series, it was the first Fire Emblem on DS, and the only one in the console that got an English localization. Shadow Dragon is a remake of good old Fire Emblem 1 on the Famicom, a game that was never released in English at the time of Shadow Dragon's release, and still kind of hasn't, except that one time they released it on Switch in English, but only temporarily. Nintendo. Because fuck you. Fire Emblem 1 is old as dirt and sucks to play. I don't think it's a hot take, but I'm sure there's at least one guy in the comments right now furiously writing an essay about how Fire Emblem 1 is actually an underappreciated masterpiece, and the remake completely ruined it, and is a bastardization of Shozo Kaga's vision. But yeah, the game has that old as piss NES feel to it. The UI sucks, the art is interesting.
This look pretty good, man. Where your clothes at?
The color palette looks like MS Paint, and it's missing the simplest quality of life features that seem like absolute no-brainers today. Something as simple as showing what a unit's movement range is when you select them is missing. Now, Fire Emblem 1 already got a remake in the form of the first half of Fire Emblem Mystery of the Emblem, or FE3 for short, on the Super Famicom. Full disclosure, I've never even touched Mystery of the Emblem, but from what I do know, it's a drastic improvement. From my friend's testimony and my own observations, FE3 looks, sounds, and plays much better than their old, janky first attempt. A lot of that comes down to the huge technological improvement from the NES to the Super Nintendo, but I'm sure they also made improvements based on what worked and what didn't in FE1. Unfortunately, FE3 isn't exactly a complete remake. A lot of FE1's content was cut and slimmed down in the transition to FE3, including some units and even entire maps. It's a much more condensed, focused retelling of Marth's journey without the fluff. To me, the main draw of FE3 will always be the new campaign. Even if FE3 was a complete remake though, it's still never been released outside of Japan. That means that when Shadow Dragon came out, it was the first time overseas players were able to experience Marth's story. It's kind of weird to think about because Marth is the face of Fire Emblem. He's the golden boy, the big man himself. He's kind of like Pikachu, but blue and less marketable and culturally relevant. Shadow Dragon is definitely a game that needed to happen, one way or the other, so fans could finally figure out just what was going on with that guy from Super Smash Bros. So how is Shadow Dragon as a remake of FE1? I'd have to say it does a pretty good job. Every character and chapter cut from FE3 makes its triumphant return here in Shadow Dragon. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the rumors and they're true. Riss is back and balder than ever, baby. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon retells the story of Marth's journey to retake his kingdom and defeat the titular Shadow Dragon with a lot more detail and a much-needed facelift from the NES classic. The story almost exclusively revolves around Marth, with a few supporting characters that for the most part aren't even playable. Outside of Marth, the playable units typically get a recruitment conversation or a single short conversation with Marth before fading into obscurity and never being mentioned again. Some of them don't even get that. This is very much Marth's story. The medium through which it's told is actually really unique and interesting too. It's told through the lens of a history book, explaining Marth's exploits on a macro level from the third person between chapters, before zooming in and showing us the story on a personal level with dialogue. And when I say a history book, I don't mean like a textbook, I mean like a volume regaling the exploits of a medieval hero, complete with these beautiful illustrations. It's presented as chronicling true events, but in such a dramatic way that an elder might relay the story to a circle of wide-eyed children. The presentation of the story is great. Now, given that it's a story from an ancient Famicom game, it's pretty simple even in its brushed up and expanded form, but it's serviceable and well put together. All Shadow Dragon was setting out to do was retell FE1's story for a new audience and a new generation, and I think it accomplished that with flying colors. Speaking of colors though, I want to discuss this game on its own merits rather than just as a remake, and I'm going to start with the presentation. So let's just address the pachyderm in the room. This game is fugly. I know it has its defenders, but why does it look like this? The maps have this drab, washed out color palette that makes every single chapter look like literal dirt. Verdant grasslands, vast mountain ranges, port cities, it all looks like it takes place in the same puddle of mud. FE1 was ugly, yes, but it was ugly by virtue of its limitations. Whether it's Super Mario Bros. Or E.T. the Extraterrestrial, all NES games have their own unique flavor of poorly aged visuals. Just a few years later, they had FE3 looking much better on the Super Nintendo. Shadow Dragon, by contrast, is ugly by choice. The DS is full of beautiful games. Of course, it's limiting hardware, but within those limitations, you can create vibrant, colorful, detailed worlds and characters. Just look at Pokemon's offerings on the system, or the Mario and Luigi games. Shadow Dragon sticks out like a sore thumb, and I can only chalk it up to misguided creative decisions. And trust me, it doesn't stop at the maps. The combat looks just as bad, if not worse. The animations are quick and snappy, but they're completely lacking in any flair, and let's face it, these character models are hideous. Quick and snappy is great, I guess, but if I was worried about speed, I would just turn off animations to save time. Animations need some kind of personality or cinematic flair to make it worth my time in the first place. Let's just compare a couple of animations from GBA Fire Emblem and DS Fire Emblem. It's really not even close. The Myrmidon is an easy place to start. A Myrmidon whirling around on the GBA tells me so much more about what this class is about. It's a fast, skilled swordsman that might not have the heaviest blows, but is deadly in its practiced precision. A DS Myrmidon is just a dude in a sword and a bathrobe. Seeing Navarre like this doesn't evoke images of a renowned, deadly swordsman. He looks like an amateur. It's so bad for unit feel. Navarre is an iconic character. There's no reason the dude from FE7, literally named Guy, should look more threatening and deadly in combat. Let's look at the Paladin as an example of a promoted class. On the GBA, the Paladin's crit animation has so much power and speed behind it. The clopping of the hooves as he charges builds anticipation until the strike, where it feels like the enemy just got hit by a truck. It's incredible. Shadow Dragon's Paladin spins his weapon one time, then goes in for the same stab as usual. Shadow Dragon's combat animations fall into their own little unique niche tier of fugly and stilted at the same time. Every other game that uses 3D models, whether you're talking the Tellius games or every post-DS game, has distinct, dynamic, and fluid animations. Sure, they might lack some of the bombastic flair the GBA games had thanks to the fact that they would look absurd in a realistic 3D setting. But the devs clearly put in the effort to still make something worth watching, and the systems have the juice to back up that creativity. Shadow Dragon using 3D models was a huge mistake in my opinion. I'm not sure if the DS's performance is the limiting factor here, or if it was just a lack of imagination or time, but Shadow Dragon is stuck in this awkward purgatory between GBA Fire Emblem and Tellius/Modern Fire Emblem. The graphical fidelity isn't there to make detailed, unique 3D models, or even have these crusty ones do anything interesting. Yet the art style is going for something too realistic to embrace the limitations and make something beautiful within the lines they've been given, like GBA Fire Emblem did. It's not just models and animations that make the characters look bad either. The portraits go for this more realistic, almost painted look. For the most part, I'd say they look good as pieces of art, but they aren't interesting as representations of characters. It reminds me of medieval portraits where everyone looks grumpy and unenthused because they had to hold neutral expressions while the artist painted them for hours and hours. There's no personality here, they all kind of just look at you with this blank stare on their face. How am I supposed to tell by looking at this that Cain is the rowdy and headstrong one, while Abel is the cool, collected one? All I see is, this one is green, this one is red. I could infer a lot of things by looking at someone like Florina, Owain, or Arthur just by looking at their portraits. Now, here's a challenge for you. Tell me one thing about Mathis just by looking at him. Trick question, you can't. The generic trash characters, though, I can forgive. The real atrocity here is Marth's portrait. What is this? Why is his chin like that? What is this angle we're seeing him from? Like, why does this look like a photo of an obese cat taken from the perspective of a not long for this world bowl of Meow Mix? It's not like this is their vision of this rendition of Marth. He looks nothing like his official art. It's just a weirdly botched portrait. It's not even a product of the art style. FE12 has the same art style and runs on the exact same engine. And his portrait in that game is so much better. He has a jawline, he looks more regal and refined, he looks, well, like Marth. Shadow Dragon Marth looks like a smelly tween that hasn't learned about deodorant yet. It's bizarre, and it colors my perception of his character in this game regardless of his writing quality. Okay, so obviously I hate this game, right? I've had nothing but terrible things to say about it so far, so this game is terrible, correct? Nope. I adore Shadow Dragon. Why then, you might ask? Why do you like this game whose maps look like artfully arranged vomit on an Applebee's bathroom floor? Well, two reasons. One, it's simple to the point that it's extremely fun to play. And two, it's fucking hilarious. Shadow Dragon is Fire Emblem synthesized to its purest form in both story and gameplay. The story is incredibly simple, and while it does have some lighthearted moments with a great sense of humor, it takes itself seriously as a genuine fantasy story and not some cringe anime bullshit. The gameplay is Fire Emblem with none of the fluff. The mechanics are simple and easy to grasp, and they work beautifully together to make a streamlined Fire Emblem experience that I think fits closer to the original Fire Emblem vision than any game that came after it. Shadow Dragon has completely and totally embraced a core tenet of Fire Emblem that seems to fade further and further away from relevance with each passing release. Permadeath. My personal favorite mechanic in just about every video game that it appears in. Shadow Dragon has over 50 playable units, most of which are completely replaceable generic bench-warming shitters. You get most of your best characters early on in the game, and characters that come after those early characters in the same class are usually meant as replacements for your original guys if they died. You aren't actually supposed to consciously choose to use Violent and Roche. They exist to replace Cain and Abel if you fumbled and got them killed. Using Mathis is literally a skill issue. As the real Marth Fire Emblem once said, "As a friend, you are replaceable. Farewell." The game just throws handfuls of comparatively worthless units at you in almost every chapter, whose sole purpose is to replace a better guy you've already been training. Funnier still, sometimes the game will just throw units at you that are comparatively worse than every unit around them from the onset, just for shits and giggles. My favorite example of this is in Chapter 2, where the game gives you not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 axe units at the exact same time. Let's look at them, shall we? First, you have Board and Cord. Cord has solid bases and actually really good growths. In comparison, Board's bases and growths are pretty bad, most notably with a hilariously low 10 per fucking cent speed growth. Cord starts with E rank and axes, meaning it will take some time before he's able to use anything more than your standard iron axe, while Board has an impressive C rank to start, meaning that he can already use some of the more interesting and powerful axes. Therefore, Board and Cord pose an interesting decision. What do you value more in a unit, and who will you choose as a result of your values? Trick question, dumb fuck. You're using Barst, the axe fighter that joins you on the exact same turn as Board and Cord, but with drastically better bases, growths just as good as Cord, and a D axe rank, which is enough to use the hand axe, the only axe that matters at this point. Why are Board and Cord even here? Not to replace Barst, you can't possibly have lost Barst yet. Unless you lose him this chapter and decide to rock Cord instead, by the time you do lose Barst, you'll be far enough into the game that the other two will be almost impossible to train up as replacements. So what about that 4th axe unit I was talking about? Well, allow me to introduce you to Daros, a pirate, which is basically just a fighter that can walk on water tiles, and also he's the only one for some reason. Daros starts as an enemy that you need to talk to with Marth, but if you leave Marth in his range, he'll actually walk up and recruit himself on enemy phase. Hold on. Then immediately be one-rounded and killed on higher difficulties by the enemies that move after him on the same enemy phase that he joins, giving you no opportunity to save him if you placed Marth incorrectly. Game design! But what if you do manage to safely recruit Daros? Well, congratulations, you now have a unit that is functionally identical to Board, an already terrible unit, but with arguably worse growths, a worse class on promotion, and a lower axe rank. I fucking love Shadow Dragon. I love that the game is encouraging you to actually play by its rules and accept death as part of gameplay. You make a mistake and one of your soldiers dies as a result of your strategic blunder. That's war. Or if you're Daros, that's just how it is on this bitch of an earth. And you know what? That's also interesting strategic gameplay. This employment of permadeath is enhanced further by the fact that as far as I'm aware, not a single character in this game gets to retreat. In just about every other Fire Emblem game, if a character with a speaking role in the plot dies in combat, they go, I've been mortally wounded, but I cannot fall here. I guess I have to sit out every battle from now on. And then they functionally die insofar as that they're removed from your party, but they remain alive in the context of the world. Shadow Dragon says fuck all that and strips plot armor from even the most important characters. For example, let's say Sita, notorious bad bitch gaslighter, Marth's future wife and queen, mother of his children, and great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of the main protagonist of Awakening, caught an arrow because you weren't paying attention? She's dead. You broke the timeline. Characters appearing in plot-relevant positions in the sequel, FE12, doesn't protect them either. That game just kind of assumes everyone survived and allows your playthrough of Shadow Dragon to be its own self-contained story. I love that about this game. No one is safe, just like a real battlefield. I wish more Fire Emblem games had the balls to actually kill off important characters if you mess up, and that we got more alternative dialogue for when these characters are supposed to appear. Speaking of permadeath, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon has a little more going on under the hood than just being a simple remake of FE1. It actually has 7 brand new characters to use, along with a 4-chapter prologue and 5 whole optional side chapters. Sounds great, right? Well, unfortunately, your average player will probably never see any of them. First of all, 2 characters, Frey and Norn, only join your party if you play the prologue. The issue is that the prologue, for some baffling, incomprehensible reason, is only available on normal mode. So assume that you're like me and like playing this game on harder difficulties, you can just rule these 2 out entirely. I didn't even know Norn existed until like a year ago. But it gets funnier. The other 5 units are available in their respective side chapters, which are available regardless of difficulty. Except, in order to access these side chapters, the vast majority of your units need to be fucking dead. That's right, for some stupid arbitrary reason, the requirement for all of these chapters is that you have 15 or fewer units remaining before each of them, otherwise you just skip right past them. The best part is, these optional units range from basically worthless to okay at best. The only standout ones are Frey and Nagi, with Frey only being available in normal mode, where even Arcanea's finest can mow down hordes of enemies, and Nagi only being available for the last chapter, and only if you fucked up and lost all of your tools to beat the final boss. Hilarious. Even disregarding the weirdness of the new content, while the chapter-by-chapter gameplay is, as mentioned before, simple, There's so many unique Shadow Dragonisms that give this game its unique gameplay identity. Sita's broken wing spear that can one-shot almost every boss in the game when forged, the dominance of Draco Knights, the almost complete absence of a resistance stat. That's Shadow Dragon, baby. And who could forget the ludicrous absurdity of the Warp Staff with no range limit, of which you get 3 copies at 7 uses each that are all repairable, allowing for insane one-turn clears of a majority of maps. Shadow Dragon's balance also constantly hovers somewhere between a masterwork of game design and a complete affront to both nature and God. Want to play the game at a normal and reasonable pace? Great, you'll have a great time. It'll work as intended, it's a great strategy game. Want to finish the game in less than 100 total turns? Well, then you can warp Marth around to your heart's content. Want to spend hundreds of turns grinding Gordon to level 20 on the first map by shooting at the boss and letting him regenerate? No one's stopping you, you sociopath! Shadow Dragon is a unique and silly game, but also a game that allows for immense skill expression and satisfying strategies at any level. Whether you're shooting for low turn counts or abusing the game's mechanics to make your characters as broken as possible with all the time in the world. All of this goofiness is compounded further by this game's reclass system, my favorite part of the game. Reclassing is a staple feature of Fire Emblem these days, and it made its debut in Shadow Dragon in its most primitive and also most anarchic form. Basically, you can take any unit and reclass them at will with no penalty on the preparation screen into any other class that is also within their class set. To be honest, usually this feature exists primarily to swap your paladins to Draco Knights and vice versa depending on how many archers are on the map. There's not much else to do with it in an optimal context. But if you just want to fuck around, this system is hilarious. Dark Mage Cord? Why not? Archer Navarre? Probably better than Gordon. Healers all dead? Congratulations, Rad, here's your heal staff. Reclassing opens the floodgates to some really funny and chaotic stuff. The characters in this game are ironically made more memorable and lovable to me by how faceless and worthless they are, and being able to mold them into abominations that they really are not meant to be is a big part of what makes them stick out in my mind. I couldn't tell you much about half the cast of a game like FE6, FE7, or FE8, but I treasure every single unit in Shadow Dragon for their blandness, and the reclass system is a huge part of that. This hilarity goes a long way towards making Shadow Dragon memorable, and it combines beautifully with its simple yet somewhat janky gameplay. Shadow Dragon has 6 difficulty settings, making it one of the most customizable Fire Emblem experiences on the market. You can custom curate your experience to be exactly as difficult as you want it to be. Personally, I think Hard 5 is a little excessive for repeat playthroughs. It's more of a tough puzzle game than a free-flow strategy game at that point. I typically settle around Hard 3, maybe Hard 2 if I'm doing something really goofy. But if you're new, you can start with Normal Mode, or maybe Hard 1 if you want a bit of a challenge. I know in 2024 we're all about accessibility and not gatekeeping, but honestly, I'm really glad this game doesn't offer a casual mode, because permadeath is so core to Shadow Dragon's identity that I truly think it has no place here. But if you're scared of incurring too many losses, you can still play on an easier difficulty and utilize your chapter saves wisely to get that intended experience. To sum up my thoughts on Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, it's Fire Emblem at its most basic, but also somehow at its most unique. While it feels like nothing but the Fire Emblem essentials at first, delving into its mechanics and identity reveals a complex, unique experience that isn't replicated anywhere else in the series. Not even in FE1 or 3, the games it's remaking, or FE12, its direct sequel. Shadow Dragon might not have the widest appeal, or the cleanest presentation, but if you're a Fire Emblem fan and you haven't given this game a try, you're missing out. Even if you're not a fan, Shadow Dragon is an interesting place to start, and a great strategy game. It is a retelling of where it all began, after all. And where better to begin your own Fire Emblem journey than with the story of our favorite blue-haired Smash Bros. Guy. Oh, well, would you look at that, it sounds like the fella's finished off the boss, so it's probably about time we move on to the next chapter. We have to get Lemonade Lobster's kingdom back so I can work on my other videos. That's where my office is, after all. I hope everything's going okay over there. Did I remember to lock the door? Hello, YouTube. I am the Shadow Shrimp Crustaceus. And today, in my first video, I'm going to tell you all about my favorite game, Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania. Yeah, I'm sure it's fine. Oh, and here comes Lemonade Lobster. I'm sure he's on his way to seize the throne. You forgot to visit a village?
Yeah, that's what I got about.
Are you serious? The one at the start of the map?
Yeah, I don't know about this. Give me okay.
Okay, yeah, just try to hurry, please.
Okay.
Well, I guess I have a little more time than anticipated, so I'll use this as an opportunity to thank you all for watching. As always, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to watch my videos. I do it as a hobby for the fun of it, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't validating watching the numbers go up and knowing people are watching and enjoying. While you're here, it would mean the world to me if you left a like and subscribed if you enjoyed what you saw. There's definitely more coming. More importantly than shilling for my YouTube analytics though, I'd love to discuss Shadow Dragon further in the comments because I think it's a really interesting entry in the Fire Emblem series. So please, leave your thoughts down below and I'll try to respond to as many comments as I'm able. And of course, I'd like to say thank you to my cool Cola crustaceans over on Patreon. Jonas Leschber, Mags' Gaming, Seth Peacock, Dirk Strider, JCK PTH, and The Wind is Blowing. You guys are awesome, and it really means a lot that you enjoy my content enough to invest in me. Oh, well, there it is. Lemonade Lobster just seized the throne. Looks like he's over there talking with one of the side characters. I'd better get over there. I don't want to get left behind for the next chapter. Thanks again for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day or night, and I'll see you guys next time.